It was said that the Muses originated as whispers in the ears of those who invoked them, like an incantation that possesses the artist into carrying out the will of some unnameable, personified truth. The Muses in Greek mythology were a group of 9 women who were the inspiration for all creation in the arts and for the pursuit of knowledge. This makes sense to me because muses to artists do feel like they hold some kind of secret wisdom or truth in which it's our duty to uncover that through our representations of them. It feels like the muse wants us to depict them. They want us to be inspired. It is their purpose, and it's my purpose to carry out whatever agenda they may have. Muses are the lifeblood of all art, the catalyst for all action, for the sacrament of creation. But what makes a muse? How does an artist know one when they see one? What qualities could we possibly possess ourselves that the artist might find holds the key to their creative desire? I hear a lot of women today, they say they want to be a muse, they want to be captivating, alluring, mysterious. And I think that I'm trying to attempt to share what those characteristics are from my observations. I myself, my first muse was in high school, and I didn't know what that meant even at the time until a far more intelligent friend of mine at the time told me that, oh, she's your muse. That's why you talk about her that way. That's why you paint her. That's why you draw her. That's why you're so fascinated by her all the time. And I was like, oh, of course. And so since then I have had a few, and over a course of time, observing this repetition of certain traits within people, I think for over a decade now, I think I can pin down what those traits are, at least a few of them. And I should say that muses are different from idols in the way that they are specifically what inspires us to create, not necessarily emulate them in how we dress, or it's an inspiration to action, to creation specifically. It isn't just to, be a greater version of yourself or to give you courage or anything like that. It's specifically for creation or the search for knowledge, for some kind of truth, for philosophy, that kind of thing. A muse inspires an artist to immortalize them, to catch some perfect glisten in their eye or the angle of an elbow. There's some kind of mystery to be uncovered about a muse, and our desire and our purpose work in tandem. Whenever Patti Smith first saw Eddie Sedgwick in a magazine, she said that she seemed entirely self-possessed, as if nobody in the world existed but her. This phrase, this sentence, what Patti Smith has said here is first, foremost, end all be all, every muse needs to be like this. This is what I'd call the ethereal gene. It's what my How to Be Ethereal series is all about. I've said certain words on this channel for years: ethereal, solipsistic, selfish, indifferent, virginal, more recently, autotelic. There's so many words to describe this disposition, this demeanor about a certain kind of person, about a muse. Otherworldly people strike you as being separate from everyone else. Every time. Muses need to possess this quality, otherwise they wouldn't inspire you if they were not like this, if they were not singled out like that in the middle of a crowd, if something about them did not seem different. If they are like this, then not only do they seem separate or otherwise entirely alone in their own universe, just simply coexisting with ours, they seem completely unaffected by our world. And Eddie was certainly like this. Some people would call it her aristocratic allure, maybe. Maybe it's because of her education. She was very fashionable. She was graceful. She was a dancer. She was very striking and very consistent in her look and her features, which I'll talk about later. But her eloquence and the momentum of her speech specifically, her wisdom, her cynicism, all of these things add to this allure that she is not from here. With Eddie specifically, it was a little bit more melancholic. She seemed to know too much, and she herself was ethereal. She died very young of a drug overdose at 28. She seemed too fragile for this world. She's a very actually perfect example for this category. Too delicate. For Eddie, this all-knowingness, this kind of omnipotence of feeling flighted, like from another world, like this world was too dark, too heavy, is this characteristic, this disposition in a person is very common for somebody self-possessed, somebody selfish, solipsistic. They seem to know more than they should, or they're entirely unaffected by it all. In the happier types, I've noticed this. They seem to be almost childish. How children are in the beginning stages of their life, where they're not yet cognizant of themselves or other people, how they affect other people. It's that kind of thing, where they are totally all consumed in themselves. But nonetheless, this kind of characteristic of feeling separate, of being ethereal, of being solipsistic, self-possessed, whatever you want to call it, you have to have it, because this being of another world is what inspires an artist to capture that person, to capture that fleeting person, to ask what that world is about that they're in, to want to know what distant thing they're focused on. All muses are like small gods, and we hope to capture them somehow, like how the Catholic Church has these reliquaries of Jesus Christ's face imprinted on a napkin, a handkerchief, or a pillow or something like that. That's what we feel compelled to do as an artist, is to capture them on their way out. Someone's air. I like to say air because I really hate the word vibe so much, but there's few words to describe this. The air of a person, everything surrounding that person, this aura, this is something that needs to feel supernatural. It is the artist's job to catch the likeness of a muse, and I say likeness very specifically. The likeness of a muse is how is everything surrounding them, all of this air. And this air is this mirage, because, and it's the mirage, I mean specifically because whenever you look at paintings of muses versus how they look in real life, you'll know what I mean. There is a filter.
You look at a picture of the Marchesa Casati, for example, a photograph of her, and she does not look by any means nearly as attractive or alluring as she does in paintings of her. And it's because we're not looking at the Marchesa like that. We are looking at her through this lens, this mirage that her entire demeanor imposes on us. The Divine Marchesa was an Italian socialite in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. She died when she was in her 60s, I believe. She made it her goal in life to be the ultimate aesthete, to be the ultimate dandy, to make her life a work of art. She is the woman that everyone knows as this archetypal image of a woman walking down the street with cheetahs on a leash. It has something to do with the physical appearance, but it has very little to do with how, our beauty standards are affecting things. The Marchesa at the time was too slender. The Marchesa at the time was considered almost old-fashioned in the way that she dressed. Everything around her was possessed by her air, by her aura, by her demeanor, by all of the theatrics that surrounded her. That That was what was important. And that is the air that I'm talking about. This is this spirit, maybe you could call it. And it's these rose-colored glasses that you put over top of all of your flaws. Casati was often noted, of course, after all of these compliments about her, there were these small mentions of the fact that the Marchesa was actually very awkward. But this was all clouded over. Every one of her flaws was clouded over by the fact that she had this grandeur about her, that she had this air that was otherworldly. She was very into the occult, and she factored that into her life. And these are things, this is what I'm talking about, an air. It's as best as I can describe it.
This is perhaps the most obvious of the characteristics, because muses inspire us to create and to try and recreate what we see, or what we think we see, I suppose, talking about mirages and the air and everything. Every muse has some kind of extraordinary physical trait or collection of traits. For Eddie, it was her serpentine eyebrows that seemed to parallel with this dark contour lines of her makeup and culminated in these black holes of her eyes and these big earrings that she would always wear that went down to her collarbones. For the Marchesa, it was because she was very cadaverous, they called her, very tall, very lean. She had bright orange hair and also very deep, captivating eyes. And these muses were wonderful, but someone who seems to surpass just merely capturing a likeness of a muse and just enhancing a certain feature of theirs would be Pablo Picasso, and how Pablo Picasso depicted Marie-Thérèse Walter.
Marie-Thérèse was perhaps Picasso's favorite woman in the absolute light of his life. Despite all of his other wives and his other mistresses, Marie-Thérèse seemed to be the whole of his heart. It is believed that he loved her most out of all the women that he had. Though she was very young when they started their affair, they had a child together. And when Picasso died, so did Marie-Thérèse 4 years later, because she could not live without him. But the way that I want to talk about striking features, because any artist can enhance a feature, but a true artist, I think, is able to transmute that feature into something else. And I think that Picasso did that with Marie-Thérèse's hair. The way that Picasso depicts this in paintings is almost like that little bit of hair on the side of her head is like a crescent moon, and her face is the rest of the moon. And it seems like this was this little peeking of light into his life in the later years. It seems to say something about his feelings about her. Other mistresses and wives of Picasso don't have this luminous quality. In fact, a lot of them are rather dark. They seem to be distorted, contorted in ways, but Marie-Thérèse was sensual and sexual and almost Rubenesque, and she seemed to be this nymph-like, perfect creature to him, this idyllic female to him. And you can see that in the loving way that he paints her. And it's this feature, and her eyes are often depicted in very strange, almost like salamander-like way. But her hair, just one little part of her that isn't even her face, has become a motif in the work. And that's how you know that a feature is truly inspiring, because it assumes, it transmutes its meaning, it transcends its original meaning, and it becomes something symbolic, or it takes a new form. It is reborn in a different way throughout the work, throughout how many paintings that he did of her. That's how you know a feature is truly striking, I think. That's how you know that has to be a part of a muse.
I could talk about other qualities, like elocution, sense of fashion, personality, pageantry, and those are all great. Those are essential to being a muse, but I would say they were not foundational. For some reason, I feel like those things are accessories to the muse, while movement, I think, is something more constitutive, because you take the clothes away, you take away any ability to speak or express yourself, and movement is the last thing left aside from your actual physical appearance. And I say this because you have to move through the world, and the way you move through the world is so important to being a muse. The way you open a door, the way you step through the portal, the way you press your fingers through the leaves of a book that becomes also transfixing before anything else. It's part of the air. It's part of this magic, this spell casting. I see how someone moves before anything else, even. Sometimes I can feel somebody's air before I see them, but I'd say movement is the first thing. I look at someone's hands. I look at how their legs are draped, that kind of thing. And I mean, before you refute me, there's even a reason why movies depict cool people as moving slowly. This is not just a trick to make you notice them more. It's because it's to show their separateness, this otherness, this ethereal quality. That is translated into movement just as much as it is how somebody feels to you. That otherness, like they walk on a different time frame, literally, like the slowness, they're obliged to physics of some other dimension that just merely interlays with ours. Does that make sense? I mean, movement is huge for muses. How they're posed, how they stand, how they lift an object, there's some kind of mathematics behind it.
Mel was one of those first people that made me aware that grace could exist in a person without any kind of discipline or effort. Melanie, and this was movement. Melanie, of course, possessed all of the traits that I've talked about before, but because she is a muse, she has all of the qualities. But this ethereal nature, aristocratic air. She didn't come from a wealthy background at all, but there was something ultimately composed about her all the time. No matter when I took a picture of her, she was an actual composition each and every time. She had long, bony fingers, and she elongated them more with long, black, curved acrylics, and she was very goth at the time. She's gone through multiple different aesthetics because she knows she can, because she is a muse. She knows that she can assume whatever personality that she wants. Every time she took a drag of her cigarette, every time she took out a cigarette, her long bony hands and the way that they fell together to have this gesture to be able to hold the cigarette, and how she sat down. She always wanted to sit down when she smoked. She thought it was ridiculous to stand up while you smoked, which I thought was wonderful. The collection of her bones, it seemed to follow some kind of physics that I didn't understand, that wasn't part of this world. Something that was so ultimately composed, really, like a composition, always. A muse, even if they are clumsy, it's somehow elegant. Like sprezzatura, it seems learned. There's still something trained about it. They move through this world as if they've done it 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000 times. Some people are just nice to look at, but they're not muses.
You know that she is a muse because I'm doing this video right now, because I'm trying to figure it out. That's how you know. The muse, which is part of this whole elaborate web of beauty, just merely a component, a conduit of beauty. The muse has impacted my life so much that I have dedicated this channel, let alone my entire life, trying to describe this air, the qualities of them, this ethereal nature of certain beautiful people. It's inspiration. That's as dedicated as inspiration gets. My life is dedicated to this. My life is dedicated to figuring it out. And I don't know if I could ever find anything else in this world that could convince me to dedicate my life. I could give two shits about reality, because I'm more concerned with what that beauty thing is all about. That's what I think a good use of my time is.